Okay. Well, welcome to another Auto Buyer's Guide podcast, everybody. I have a new widget on my desk that plays noises, and so we have been playing with the noise playing thing. Unfortunately, I can't
Mhm.
hear them, so if I accidentally hit a random button and Travis is laughing, that's what's happening. But hey, it's
Yep.
another Auto Buyer's Guide podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the news, buying a Hyundai on Amazon, car sales, what we're driving now, and maybe some EV tax credit ideas.
If you're looking for a new or used car to buy, maybe a truck or SUV or all-electric ride, we're the guys to help you decide on the Auto Buyer's Guide.
So, Travis, Tesla has apparently released the Model Y-shaped Kraken.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a whole 16 hours since I last saw you, but in that time, we got the drop of what the new Model Y is going to look like. And I got to be honest, I don't think it's any better.
Are they actually calling it a Juniper, or is it some other kind of bush?
Well, they they never called the Model 3 the Highland. They just rolled it out as the updated Model 3, right?
Okay.
So I don't think we get the fancy names for them, but the expectation was that the Model Y is going to get the Model 3 treatment. And they sort of have. It's been obviously resculpted a little bit, but it's hard to resculpt something when the general shape is still the same and you want to give it a whole new face. It doesn't always work super well. And not everything was transferred over. And I think some people are going to be excited. I did see that it looks like the stocks are going to remain.
Yes, turn signal stocks. I am really happy about that. I think that's logical because the Model Y is obviously their best seller. So
hmm
you don't want to alienate everybody. I would say it's easier to alienate a Model S customer than a Model Y customer. But there's also
Yeah.
some range update tweaks, right?
Well, they only have the numbers for the Chinese model, so we don't
Ah,
have any official comparison here. And I didn't look to see if there was an actual increase. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there was a small one, but it could also just be some adjustments in the configurations, not specifically the components.
yeah, and it's worth noting that they haven't announced it for the US yet. But if we read the
Yep.
tea leaves, as always happens, it's gonna come here.
Yeah, Tesla's models are not market specific. They are full market. Everything's the same as close as they can be. So I would not expect us to get a different version, especially because Tesla's not the dominant force in China that they are over here in North America. So I'd be surprised, but again, a little bit disappointed that I just don't think it looks better. And I don't love the look of the current Model Y.
Hmm.
I think it's a little bit bubbly for me. But what they've done is try to take this bubbly look and make it sharper. And I just don't think it's translated all the way through. But I would expect it to be a better riding model, more or quieter, more composed. So it should be an improvement. I just think aesthetically, probably not.
Yeah, so big changes, guys, are the new front end design with that big light bar, kind of Cybertrucky, I guess you'd say. I actually think
Yeah.
the front end looks better than the old one. The headlights on the Model Y, it always looked like a Model 3 that had been overinflated and then left out in the
Mhm.
sun to melt just a bit. And I think the sharper lines somehow work for me, but we also get a slightly bigger screen. We still get the turn signal stocks. We get the 8-inch screen in the back,
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
la some of the other Tesla models. So I think
I
it's a
like the
worth.
light bar in the rear.
Yeah.
I just don't think that thin bar up front really translate to that body shape.
I think Tesla shoppers in the US are definitely going to be happy with that because the Model Y is on the tops of the sales charts in North America. It's
hmm
selling about as well as the Toyota RAV4, which is pretty surprising here, which takes
Yeah.
us along to the 2024 sales numbers. I think GM was probably the biggest winner in North America when I really started digging down into their numbers. And the reason I say that it's also a win for affordable car shoppers in America is when you look at GM's sales increase versus 2023, they're up like 4 or 5%.
Mhm.
Almost all of that is actually due to their affordable models in their lineup, which are new or refreshed over the last 2 years. Chevy Trax up a whopping 84% in sales. I, I have to be honest with you. When I first drove the Trax, the new Trax, I thought this is
Mhm.
fantastic. Chevy's going to ruin it by charging too much for it,
Okay.
killing the base model, and not
Mhm.
making enough of them. I just assumed it would go down the rabbit hole that like the Versa and other cars have gone down, where they
Okay.
just didn't make enough of them or whatever. No, Chevy's like, yeah, we'll build as many as people want to buy, and they sold 200,000 of them last year.
That is a big number. I mean,
Yeah,
that's if we look at the charts here, right? That's some whole automaker's production.
yeah. And what's more surprising than that is that is the Trax without all-wheel drive. So Chevy is doing this split. So I would actually consider Trax and Trailblazer kind of the same vehicle in the same segment in a way.
Yeah,
Whereas you have like Honda with the HRV and a front wheel drive one or an all wheel drive one. Other manufacturers have a few different options in this segment, but most companies are selling just one thing here.
yeah. With
Kia
one
has
model, different configurations.
Kia has Seltos and they have Soul, which I guess is sort of a Trax Trailblazer corollary. But this is outselling practically everything. If we combine Trax Trailblazer and the very closely related Buicks, the Envista and the Encore, that's
Mhm.
420,000 affordable things. And it's
Yeah.
pretty hard to get any of these things over 35 grand.
Yeah, and it's great to be able to get a fully loaded vehicle because the consumer feels like they're getting everything they wanted out of it. I know someone who just bought a Trax and absolutely loves it. And I think they did something. I think that's gonna work for their favor long term. They went different directions with the Trax and the Trailblazer.
Mhm.
One feels more rugged, and that's definitely leaning into the fact that it has all-wheel drive. It's got more space, a little bit more utility, and the other one feels a little sleeker. And
Yeah.
I don't think it probably cost them an enormous amount of money to make that split. Obviously, more expensive than making just one model with different configurations. But I think, as the portfolio, it looks like another top selling vehicle in a class. And I'd probably lean towards the Trax myself. Nothing against the Trailblazer, but it's a win for more affordable vehicles, like you said. And
Yeah.
hopefully, other manufacturers are looking and saying, "Oh, obviously we've talked about the departure from affordable cars. If they see a success in the sales and Chevy leads the charge, then more power to everyone, really."
And I think what's done really well for GM with both of these is that they're not penalty boxes. So the Trax has huge screens. It's really actually shocking that they were like, yeah, let's just jam the same screens that we have in our midsize and full size SUVs, just stick them in the
Mhm.
smallest thing we got. So they look almost comically large in the Trax. Um,
Mhm.
but customers love big screens. In the Trailblazer, we also get that 17-inch, I believe it's 17-inch screen there, right? I can look it up here in a second. But my bad, sorry, it's an 8-inch screen standard. 11-inch is standard in the Trailblazer. But either way, big screens. We also get an
Still,
LCD instrument cluster.
yep.
I think they just did a really good job there. Before I get sidetracked though on GM sales numbers, let's just go through the rest here. And let me
Yeah.
know what you think about this. I know you're a fan of mid-size trucks because they're kind of the full-size trucks of, you know,
Of yesterday, yeah,
yeah.
or yesteryear, perhaps.
And Colorado Canyon, Ranger, Maverick, and Frontier all had big sales increases, but it does appear that they came at the expense partially of Gladiator and Tacoma. How do you feel about that?
The one I would be most surprised about there is Tacoma. I think Gladiator is one of those trucks that is going to have a limited market, and I think its designation, its dedication to more of off-road prowess, well earned. It's a capable machine, but again, it's just going to limit the sales. And the other thing that's going
It's
to limit the
expensive.
sales is the price of it. Yeah, so that's one thing that makes sense. It's one of those, as people buy into and replace their vehicle, they get their Gladiator and they hold on to it. It doesn't have a direct competitor. The Tacoma, I am a little bit surprised with because that has been the top selling midsize truck for a long time. I mean, it puts good sales numbers out. It has a wide variety of trims available. Um, I don't know if folks were scared of having a turbocharged, only option if they wanted the hybrid availability and just weren't sure what that looked like, or maybe it's just the trims themselves are getting too expensive. We looked at the TRD
Mhm.
Pro and the Trail Hunter, and those are definitely up there in cost, and those would be the ones that compete against the Gladiator. But also, good competition is not a bad thing. So if
Yeah.
we are reshuffling who's top dog, and let's say right now that Canyon and Colorado are making a charge. Obviously, those are paired up, but making a charge on the Tacoma, I don't see it as a bad thing. It just kind of Curious to see how Toyota would respond.
Yeah,
And
if I
obviously
were
Ranger's done very well as well.
I would say, yeah, if I were a betting man, I would say it's kind of a combination of things. Probably there are a few customers that thought Toyota abandoned them by giving it a turbocharged engine. I would guess, though, that a decent number are just flocking to the other options in this segment. Because when we take a look
Mhm.
at the historical trajectory for Tacoma, Tacoma was always second fiddle to Ranger in sales until Ford decided to let the Ranger wither on the vine and then killed it off.
Yeah.
So I would say it does kind of make sense that some of those customers might go back to Ranger now that Ranger's back and it actually seems to be an acceptable option. But Toyota also had a few reliability stumbles here and there. So there've been some teething issues with Tacoma's transmission. Hopefully they'll sort that out. Stellantis, the punching bag of the American automotive industry, down 16% on the Ram brand alone, and every brand was down except for Fiat. Although, I mean, admittedly, when you sell 5 Fiats versus 2 Fiats, you're up.
Alex, what I'm hearing is Fiat is on the rise. Quote Auto Buyer's Guide on that one. Um, and Fiat will save Stellantis. So we've seen some drops. We've seen some change in their obviously some of their corporate structure, right? We call them
Mhm.
Stellantis now.
Yeah.
That still feels very new. And there's talk of a lot of shakeup happening. I don't think I'm too worried about it. I think they're just going to be adjusting from last year. We've talked about how much money they have available to them, how much profit they've made. So they've been able to sell less vehicles and still make basically the margins, the bottom line that they need to. But again, 16% is a big drop.
Yeah.
I'd say 4 to 5% is something that you say off year on year. What model had a hiccup? What other competitor came out? That's not really the brand's fault, but 16% is hard to ignore, and I don't think they should. So they're going to have to make a push. But
Yeah.
one of the pushes that they are going to be making is into electrification. They're really, besides that 500e, there's not a real competitive option there. And by the way, 500e is not really a competitive option. So I think that's one of those places we'll need to see them step up is in hybrids. Obviously, they do sell a lot of plug-in hybrids, but in the EV market as well, that's going to be a place they can make up some ground.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how their EV sales go in 2025 because we'll have two finally. We have the Charger, and we have the Wrangler. Sorry, Wagoneer S. Silly
Mhm.
name there, and then some other ones coming soon. But I will say on the Stellantis numbers for people out there that are complaining, it seems to be a few things. So Ram seems to have been the shift over to the updated, refreshed model, and perhaps some sales drops related to the engine switchover. So it looks like Ram sales are recovering there. I'm
Mhm.
curious to see how many customers have abandoned Jeep Grand Cherokee because of the lack of the V8 engine. Because Grand Cherokee sales were down, still
Mhm.
healthy, but they were
Yeah.
down. And they did lose, of course, some core vehicles. We basically have gone a year without Charger and Challenger in production. And
Yep.
that obviously has been a big hit on sales. Chrysler 300 is also dead there. So they were selling a solid number of big sedans and those big
Yeah.
coupes in North America. And obviously, if you take a year off to transition to the brand new model, you're going to see a loss. How many will recover? I don't know. Uh, Also worth noting, I was really shocked by this because Stellantis wasn't alone for some big sales drops. Honda Civic is down 17%, Accord is down 18%. They largely made up for that in the increased sales in their SUVs because Honda as a total is up. But those are shocking numbers, I thought, especially given that the all hybrid Camry actually posted a sales increase for 2024.
I would assume that's where some of those sales went. Obviously, a Camry and an Accord are going to be cross-shopped all the time.
Hmm.
Those consumers are looking for very similar things, and that Camry is going to come out on top. Um, I think from a value perspective, I'm not to say that it's necessarily the better vehicle or the one I would pick, but at value, which is what a lot of people shop on, it's a hard one to argue. I think the shift from the Civic, you look directly at something like HRVs, CRV sales,
Hmm.
and you can see that's where folks are going instead. And that just feels like the market right now. They're moving away from, and we just talked about this yesterday. They're moving away from sedans, moving away from hatchbacks. They're moving into crossovers, which I understand, and I really wish wasn't happening because I want more sedans and hatchbacks. But I can only buy so many cars a year to try and help influence that. And, you know,
Yep.
hard to make the shift yourself.
It appears that pretty much every sedan that is available in North America posted either flat or slightly downward trending sales, Camry and a few others accepted. And I think that this transition to SUVs, I think, has done well for Mazda. I have to admit, if I look at Mazda's lineup, I think that their SUV lineup is more attractive than their sedans had been in the past or are currently. Like, I think the CX 50, CX30 are better looking than a Mazda 3 sedan or hatch, to be perfectly. Hatch has always looked a little funny to me. And I think customers seem to be agreeing because Mazda had its best sales year ever. They finally recovered to sort of the Ford era heydays for Mazda sales. And that is before we really saw any substantial sales of the new Mazda CX-50, which Mazda thinks is going to attract not only a large share of CX-50 sales, but some new customers as well.
Well, and that's especially considering the CX-50 hybrid was not really a part of this
Yeah.
either. And so that should bring in more and more folks. I do think Mazda's bounce back is because they have a strong SUV lineup. I will say, I always thought the Mazda 6 was a very nice looking sedan. So that's one where
I
I
thought it
would
was okay.
argue that was one of the better looking cars on the
Mhm.
market. But yeah, the SUVs have done a really good job of giving a premium feel without a ultra premium price tag. And I think that's definitely been an attractive thing for folks. I'm not sure how I still feel about that CX-50 versus just the CX-5,
Mm.
but that one's out of my hands. So people seem to like it. And actually, we just went and looked at a vehicle the other day that is part of some adventurous trims, and we're starting to see this push away from a small push, but we're seeing a slight resurgence in more interesting models. So a CX-5 and a CX-50 are not dramatically different, but the CX-50 looks more interesting, looks more exciting. And Mazda doesn't make more money because it looks more interesting, right? I mean, that it doesn't
Mhm.
suddenly bring them a lot more money, but it brings the competition forward. I think it's a good thing. You know, I was worried we're getting too cookie cutter. And it's nice to see some trims still being on the more interesting side of things.
Yep, and that brings, speaking of high cost, that brings us along to the Sony Honda Afeela. Dumb name, got to be honest. Sony Honda, strange name. Afeela, kind of weird.
And Afeela is the model
The
name, not
model,
the
it's an
brand.
Afeela. Well, yeah, because it's Sony Honda, but it's an Afeela 1, if I correct. So there might be an Afeela 2. I don't know. I'm not Afeela-ing even the 1.
No,
Um,
yeah.
especially not for $100,000 with 150 kilowatt charging and about 300 miles of range. This begs the question, for me at least, who
Mhm.
is this for?
You know, that's an expensive Honda, and
Mhm,
it's Sony Honda, but that's still Honda's name attached to it, and that's besides the NSX, the most expensive Honda I can think of.
mhm.
Um, and I'm not sure who it's for. It's not somebody who wants to do a lot of road tripping, that's for sure. Um, but
Or for
I
someone that wants a
worry,
big back seat.
yeah, I worry it's leaning too niche, right? There's a lot of screens, a lot of tech, a lot of things that um, not everyone loves. But hey, it's kind of one of a kind, right? It's more of a
Mhm.
rolling Best Buy showroom than it is a brand new car. I'm
Now you are younger than I am. Are you a PlayStationer?
no, I was never a PlayStationer.
Okay. So would you
I was
think
an Xboxer. Go against the curve.
see, when I think of Sony, I don't think of cutting edge technology anymore.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
I remember Walkman, Discman, mini discs. That was a great era for Sony. Sony stereos, Sony TVs. Loved me a Sony
Mhm.
TV. I had the flat Trinitron things. Those were all kinds of fantastic. Loved me some Sony monitors. But I don't think of a major tech product today other than PlayStation that I would associate with Sony in that tech forward way because I think it's because I had to live through the Sony Vaio era of computers, which
Okay.
were
Yep.
dreadful.
Yeah, making a comeback in the automotive space or putting your name in the automotive space, you would want to do it really, really well. And I don't know if flagship pricing without super standout product is the best way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. You've seen it and I haven't. So do you think there's anything that justifies that price tag, or anything that's particularly above and beyond? We're seeing some incredible displays these days.
Mm-hmm.
The Nautilus, right, has the full dash display and it's beautifully integrated, and we're seeing a lot of time and energy spent on software, but a lot of folks like you and I tend to just prefer our Android Auto and Apple CarPlay all the same.
Yeah.
Um, what is it about the Afeela that's supposed to be so different and worthwhile?
I will say, given Sony's software struggles in the past, the software and the interface and experience in the Afeela is truly fantastic. And I think better than anything I have seen on the road currently. Just the smooth, and bearing in mind I was looking at prototypes, but fully
Yep.
functional ones. The smoothness, the operation, the way that you interacted with it, the design, the fact that it basically is a PlayStation jammed in there so you can play your games, etc. All that is totally, totally cool.
Okay.
I just don't know if I need $100,000 PlayStation rolling around in a car that, other than that, is, you know, kind of middling, to be perfectly honest. There's a lot of Acura switchgear in there, which is not a bad thing. I mean, the seat
Mhm.
controls and things like that, those are definitely very Honda. Theoretically, probably seat rails and seat designs behind the scenes are probably also
Yep.
very Honda as well.
Yep.
Um, but it's the price tag, the slow charging. It's not really bringing anything new to the game on the EV side of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm.
And I don't think,
Mhm.
and I don't think it's an unattractive vehicle. So looking at it, I go, "Oh, okay, that's
Yeah,
nice." Or at very least, nice enough. But it's also not meant to be, a performance showcase either.
no,
So that's that's a
it'll be
big
quick.
price tag for not, what's its standout, and having Sony involved doesn't feel like the standout that justifies it right now.
Yeah, it'll be quick but not fast. So we'll see how
Right.
that goes, guys.
Yeah.
Car buying online. That's another thing we wanted to talk about. Hyundai will now let you buy a car via Amazon. I don't know about you, but this is something I could get into. Questions about Amazon aside.
Sure. People are looking for different ways to buy cars. They don't seem to love the dealership model, and we do all of our shopping from home. Obviously,
Hmm.
Amazon is going to be the place people do the most of it. Most major manufacturers have their own online store built into the Amazon website, which is a weird mirror of their own website. So this is an all integrated thing. Amazon's obviously trying to push this because it's only going to be good for their bottom line. But once everything's said and done, you still have to go to the dealership. I mean, for the processing of everything. So um, I don't know. I'm curious what other manufacturers were approached and said no, and what their reasons would be that Hyundai
Hmm.
said, you know what, we'll go for it.
I have this feeling that it was the reverse. I have a feeling that Amazon was kind of sending out feelers and Hyundai was the one that leapt onto it and was like, we want to do
Okay.
this. Because you are going to be able to do significant portions of the purchase process online, including assigning contracts, uploading necessary documents. It should be as close as you can get to a Tesla buying experience
Hmm.
via Amazon. I will say also kind of a carrot here in this process is currently they are offering up to whatever that means, up to
Hmm.
$2,300 in Amazon gift cards as a bonus. Um, the novel
That's a
thing
lot of
here
gift card money.
the novel thing here is, we've seen car companies try this to try and replicate the Tesla and Rivian purchase process before.
Mhm.
It didn't work well. You can do some of the stuff in advance with General Motors if you're doing a Chevy here and there, but it's not this complete and not this transparent. So here, you hop onto Amazon, you find the car in inventory, it gives you solid pricing up front. Mind you, the dealers are behind the scenes agreeing to this. So
Yep.
it gives you that pricing model up front. It shows you all the fees, which I thought was nice. So every little state fee, the smog fee, a tire fee, a whatever fee you might see, it gives you that full detail all laid out. It gives you financing options. You can enter your credit score if you know it. It'll give you estimates for the financing that has been arranged there. And then the claim is, I didn't continue all the way on because I don't need a Hyundai. Um, but but
Wasn't on the list this week.
I continued all the way along, and it does get you all the way to the point where you can agree, you can enter your driver's license, insurance details, all that kind of stuff, and then you can complete that purchase process. And supposedly, all that's left is simply picking up the keys from the dealer. So, I am super curious to see if any of our viewers have tried this. Have you completed it? Let us know, because I want to know, does that work?
I mean, the thing is, in theory, there is nothing stopping this. The only thing it's doing is removing the negotiation piece, which tends to be
Mhm.
the most adversarial, right? The most high pressure, the most uncomfortable. A product has a price, or in most cases, it just should have a price. I think this is probably one of those where you won't get the best deal, but you'll probably have the best experience. So those are,
Yeah.
those are going to be two different sides of the coin. But not everyone wants to go to war when they go buy a car. I'm not against it. I'm curious about availability. I have I had a friend who bought a different car because the dealer said, "Oh, there's no way you'll find one of those," when all he had to do was
Mm.
look at other dealers in the state to go find one. But people trust the dealer. So my question is, if I want an Ioniq 5N and I want it in white, not blue, and my nearest dealer doesn't have the white, does it just say, "Hey, here's where the other car is. Here's where you'll have to go to pick it up"? That's my question. Is when things get a little bit more nitpicky, am I going to have the options that I really want?
Well, we can answer that question. So let's give this a whirl. Okay, let's see. Ionic 5N, I'd like a white one. We hit the locate button and then we choose what we want here. You can buy one on Amazon, or it can hook you up with a dealer site, apparently. So there's one currently in stock at a dealer somewhere,
Mhm.
or we can buy through the Amazon thing, which is interestingly a little bit more expensive, it looks like.
Well,
And
and that one, I imagine, is that based on incentives not being applied? Is that a certain dealer who has a discount on the model, or is it Amazon taking just a little bit of slice to help process everything?
so this one is because it's a little bit more expensive because this dealer is charging a markup, and it's already shown here highlighted on the Amazon portal that
Okay.
the dealer has this $3,000 dealer adjustment, which offends me to my core. If a dealer wants to charge you a dealer adjustment on a car, just say no. So my answer here
Hmm.
is just say no to San Leandro Hyundai, because uh, you know, upcharge, not a fan of that one. But it is interesting that Amazon also says here, if you click on the other button, that there is and this is where I like that they are throwing people under the bus, that there is a Vallejo Hyundai is
Hmm.
selling the exact same configuration car with
Hmm.
no dealer markup.
That's a quick way to
Um,
save some money, and if it costs you a little bit of money in time and gas, probably well spent.
But it's not available through the Amazon Purchase Program, which
Okay.
is sad. So,
But not terribly surprising, because if people are looking for convenience, they probably say, "Oh, this one's here. I
mhm.
will go ahead and just click purchase," versus wanting to go into that dealer. So actually, I'm curious in that situation how many people would just say, "Oh, do I want to go deal with that, or do I just click yes?"
Yeah, there's going to be some value to just clicking yes. What I'm also curious about is what happens if you click yes, and at this very moment, I click yes, you're at the
Mhm.
dealer,
You click, yep.
you're test driving that exact car, and you tell the dude,
Mhm.
I'll take it. How does that work? Do you get told, "Oh, sorry, some dude online just clicked the button?" Or
Mhm.
do they sell it to you and the dude online goes to grind pick up the keys or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, sorry, we sold your
I
car."
I bet the contract on processing is meant to be so tight that it says this was purchased at this time. But I have a feeling at that dealership, if they said, "We have someone who's going to buy this car today, but if you pay $500 more, we will give it to you. That very well could happen.
Mm.
Not like I speak from having experience in the car business or anything, but I could see that being the case.
I could see that being a concern. Well,
Yeah.
let's move on to cars we're driving now. So we have a Kia K4 this week.
Ooh.
I
Yeah.
have to admit, this is also going to date me a tiny bit. Do you recall ever seeing the Easy Spirit commercials, shoe commercials where they had nuns walking around in high heels?
Um, let's say perhaps.
The whole tagline was "Looks like a pump, feels like a sneaker."
Mhm.
That is the Kia K4. It looks aggressive. Well, it's the manly equivalent. It looks aggressive. It looks hungry. It looks
Mhm.
sporty, dynamic, etc. But it kind of drives like a sneaker. So the only ones we get are a slightly neutered 1.6 liter turbo. We get
Mhm.
the base engine, which is on the slow side. It's lovely. I mean, it's comfy. It's relatively quiet.
Mhm.
Strangely fuel efficient for a Kia. Fuel economy hasn't really been
Not a
Kia's
bad
forte
thing.
for a while.
Yep.
But now it's their K4. Um,
Yeah.
but for that same price, basically the top end models, you could get yourself a Civic Hybrid, which apparently you should be able to find because sales are down, right?
Because there's sales
Uh,
down. Yep.
you could get yourself a Civic Hybrid that is faster 0 to 60 than a Civic Si, handles
Yep.
shockingly well, and gets 49, 50 miles per gallon.
But is it better looking than that K4? And I think a lot of folks tend to go, they shop with their eyes, right? They say,
Mm,
this looks good. I feel good driving in it. I would tend to lean towards that Civic Hybrid. But again, you and I are not the average consumer. I'm also not terribly surprised that the K4 is not terribly lively. If it checks enough boxes, people will buy it.
yeah,
Is there a K4 GT? That's where I would expect something to be,
there is
you know,
not.
more interesting.
And
Careful what badges you put on there. Don't
yeah,
tell me it's a GT and not make it more interesting.
there's a GT line and there's a GT
Yes.
line turbo. But
Hmm.
they did not take the turbo from the Elantra N and jam it under that hood in any respect, which
Yeah.
I think is definitely a bummer. Um, I will say the handling is sharp, so we don't have access to a skid pad, but I know folks that do. Some of our competition, I won't mention them. But K4 actually pulls more G's on a skid pad, faster in a figure eight, handles better than a Honda Civic in any
Hmm.
of the trims outside the Si or the R. It
Right.
really does handle very well. What kind of offends me though, in a weird sort of thing, is that Kia's like, we focused on handling dynamics. It has a really nicely done independent rear suspension. They've polished all the blemishes on the Forte's handling
Yep.
demerits. So fixed everything. But then they gave it this edgy look. They gave it a squircle, a square steering wheel, like it's
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
really sporty looking thing. So
Hmm.
everything screams something wicked this way comes
It's just not quite that.
until you press the accelerator pedal, and then you're like, I feel cheated.
Mm. um, yeah, you can't have it all, especially
No,
on an affordable model, right?
but you can have it all on our next vehicles because the next one is the Silverado RST that you're testing, or you should be able to have it all for how much that RST costs.
Yeah, you're talking about the tracks and how great it feels to have that interior. What feels less great is having a very similar feel interior, especially proportionally, in the Silverado, which I believe had a price tag of about 96,000 and change. Which for those keeping track is a lot of money, and it's also a lot of truck, a
Yeah,
lot of truck.
it does get you quite far on a charge. I will say
It
that.
does. And so I just dropped it off the other week. And coincidentally, I dropped it off the same day I came down to pick up our C40. And that C40 is not great for road trips. That Silverado would have been,
Hmm.
um, because 440 miles, I believe, was that rated range.
Yep.
And the 7 stops I made in my 830 something odd miles, uh, would have been cut down pretty drastically. It doesn't mean I would have made only 2 stops, because number one, I was not going to get 880 miles, 0 to 100%. That's just not the way it's going to work on the highway. But it probably would have broken it down into closer to about 3 stops and just do that 20 to 80% charge window. And that would have been a huge difference. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would have enjoyed it more, because that is a lot of truck to be driving around. And my biggest disappointment is that it's not necessarily the most comfortable truck to be driving around. With the price tag like that, I would expect more premiumness coming through, and I felt like it was a little bit short on that. Not to say I hate it. It just, I was
Yeah.
left wanting, especially for the price tag.
For that price tag, I would expect more of an Escalade interior, and you do not find that
No,
in that.
no. It feels more like a Traverse.
Yeah, I will say the numbers are impressive, because if we take a look at our metric for measuring range, 440 miles, EPA combined, it ends up being around 350 to 360 miles of highway range in the real world. Very solid. You could go from the Bay Area to Los Angeles with a tiny DC fast charge stop, maybe 5-6 minutes would be fine. Literally like a run and get a Starbucks, come back out,
Break.
move
Yep.
along to the next stop. If you were genuinely road tripping it, you could get about 300 miles on the first charge, and then you'd be stopping every 250 miles. That's a pretty decent vehicle. I mean, you'd be getting, because the reason to stop every 250 is that's the sort of 70% portion of that battery you'd be using, if you're wondering out there listening. I will say, though, big batteries do take a long time to charge, and then there's that price tag.
Yeah, I will say the big batteries take a while to charge, but they'll also charge faster longer. That was another thing that unfortunately that C40 did not. But yeah, for 96,000, we could buy 3 of our C40 and still be able to buy an old beater pickup to have a pickup around the house. So yeah, it's a steep order, but it is a unique product. I love the midgate. It's got lots of functionality built into it. I may make
I
an
love
argument
that
that
midgate.
it's the most capable truck Chevy's built. It's a tough one, but it's I'll stand by it in certain corners. Yeah, it's a lot of truck.
Yeah, I admit it. Admittedly, it would require having a gasoline truck that's a unibody truck, which not everybody's gonna be a big fan of.
Right,
But
we'll have one.
I would love to see a ICE version of that in a way.
Yeah,
It would just be
you know what
so
I'd love to see?
intriguing.
Do that on the Ridgeline.
Mm-hmm.
That's your unibody truck. Just
Yeah.
embrace it. They've already got clever packaging when it comes to their bed, right? They've got the in-bed storage and the whole thing. Just go one step further.
Yeah. The Avalanche, of course, was not, and that actually the Avalanche is a good example, because that was not a unibody truck. For some reason, a lot of people want to say that it was. That was still a body on frame truck. It was just that they took the frame from the full size SUVs, and then they jammed a single body on top, rather than having the body split from the bed and the cab, etc. So it was that hybrid between suburban and truck and whatever. But I could get behind a redo of that, because the midgate's pretty darn practical.
And honestly, I'm really disappointed that Chevy did not go Avalanche with that blue E at the end of it to make it the electric model. Sounds like Silverado just had the name recognition, but I think you could have stuck with the ICE Silverado and said, hey, this is the electric truck, and gone a different direction. But that's above my pay grade.
When I look at the sales chart here, I think it's because they thought the Avalanche was a failure, because they sold, depending on the year, it hit the high of 93,000 one year. 2009, it dropped down to 16,000, although 2009 was not a great year, of course, for car sales there.
Right.
By 2012, it had kind of recovered to 24,000-ish or so. I think the problem, though, was that the second generation Avalanche, just there were some things that weren't great. And also, if they thought it was going to sell more, I think they were wrong. I think it would just they needed to give it more time to really go somehow. I just truly believe that could work. And then, of course, we now have the Rivian R1T in for review. I was really interested in this one because it is the first car in the US that will be sold with adaptive LED headlights. Well, it currently is, because they actually function this way. So for everybody out there that doesn't know, in Europe, you've been able to do this for a while where you have matrix LED headlights. It's going to be a bit difficult to tell you this in a podcast format, but imagine if you could be driving out on a country road with your high beams on, and then in the field of the high beam, you could just put a blank square over the vehicle that's in front of you. So that way you're not blinding the vehicle in front of you, but you can actually have the high beam showing everywhere else around the world. And then the cameras will cause that spot to change as the car in front of you moves around a corner or you move around a corner, etc. It's a really cool technology. Have to admit, though, having driven Audis and some Opels around Europe with headlights that feature this function, the Rivian one, it's not as good, but it's better than nothing.
It can also improve, right? I mean, that's
Mhm.
one of the things about the cars these days can get better over time, which is just not something we've seen. It doesn't mean they always will, and it doesn't mean the same model will be carried forward with the new tech, even if there's a software update. But like I said, having it there is great. I live in an area that doesn't have any streetlights, so it can
Mhm.
get really dark. That's also gets tough when it gets a little foggy, that sort of thing. So having adaptive headlights sounds like a great feature to me. It's just I'm not surprised we're seeing it on something like Rivian because they're pushing,
Mhm.
and not every manufacturer has to push. So hopefully, I said I'll be there in a few days. Hopefully, I can test that out when it gets a little bit darker. But curious to see because I'd love to leave my high beams on more than I do right now.
Yep, I will give it a bit more of a test this weekend, and of course, try and include that in our review on it. It is going to be tricky. Night shots tend to be a little tricky trying to show people
Yeah.
headlights, but we'll give it a whirl. That brings us along to the used EV tax credit. So, Travis, roll us through how this works.
All right. First and foremost is that the stipulations, because those are the big ones. The first is going to be how much money you make. So you've got 150,000, 125 and a half, and 75. That's going to be for single filers, joint filers, head of household, as those are split up. The other one is going to be how much the vehicle costs, because the whole point here, and I really do appreciate this, is that the tax credit is intended to go to folks who would be more beneficial, it'd be more impactful for them
Mhm.
than not. So the vehicle itself is supposed to be $25,000 or less. The good news is there are quite a few EVs that are going to qualify for this. The C40 that I'm driving right now would be a little bit over, but in another year it would be okay. And one of the other qualifications, sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit, is that it has to be at least 2 years old. So this C40 is a 2023, so it would technically qualify, but in a next year scenario, it would also still be eligible. And it's a pretty substantial amount that you're able to get on that credit, up to $4,000, limited to 30% of the car's purchase price. So you do have to have a car that's expensive enough to maximize
Yep.
that total value. But based on some of the other alternatives or tax credits that have been available, and I'm sure what were considered, I would say overall I'm pretty happy with this one. And again, what excites me the most is that a lot of EVs are going to be included in this. And I really do hope it pushes some EV sales into folks who may either have been a little bit hesitant and a little bit of push doesn't hurt, or just been really worried about affordability. And now they can, if they're budgeting correctly, or looking ahead, they can say, hey, I can afford this car a little bit more, or I can afford a little bit more car, and they can start taking advantage of EV benefits.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how this continues. Of course, if it survives the current coming
Yeah,
administration.
correct. Yep.
Um, but it is interesting because the drumbeat of resale value is terrible in EVs. It actually is a benefit to the used
Hmm.
EV market. Admittedly,
Absolutely.
yeah, admittedly, it's going to be hard to find qualifying EVs that are new, but there are still going to be
Hmm.
things like an Equinox EV in a number of years that would be a solid vehicle to apply this credit to.
Hmm.
Um, some additional gotchas here are um, some of them quite logical. Like the person filing can't be a dependent. So you can't
Right.
get your kid an EV. Like, say you make $200,000 on your own. You can't have your kid, your 18-year-old, get the EV and get the credit
Right.
if you're paying for it, if they're your dependent. That won't work there. Um, Also, it only works the first transfer of the vehicle. So they can't be that used. So,
Right.
someone on the other side of the wall buys an EV. They trade it into a dealer. Dealer sells that EV to me. I don't claim the credit. I
Hmm.
then cannot have that car purchased by you through a dealer for you to get the
Right.
credit. That's over. And then, of course, there's the dealer component. So you do have to purchase the vehicle from a qualified dealer. But there are services like Key Savvy that will act as a dealer in between for you. They'll charge you about $100 to do it. But basically, that would allow me to buy a new car, sell it to Travis,
Yep.
and Travis to get that credit on that used transaction, assuming all the prices are right. I don't know about you, but part of me thinks this would make for some interesting bad loopholes. Um, say you
Bad
qualified,
loopholes in what sense?
well, say you qualified for the AGI limit.
Hmm.
Your income's under their AGI,
Hmm.
and we're going to do a private party transaction through KeySavvy. Well, we just tell KeySavvy that the price is $25,000, but I'm
Mm.
going to make you kick me back $8,000 in order to do this and go through KeySavvy.
Right. I mean, do you think anyone ever is dishonest about the transaction price on something? Because
Oh, my goodness, on
I,
used cars? Yes.
well, because in, when you declare, Washington, we pay sales tax on the vehicles. So
Mhm.
when I say here's what I paid for the vehicle, I write that down. Um, and there's a window it really needs to fall in, but
Mhm. Mhm.
I've heard perhaps people are not always entirely accurate.
Yeah, I will never admit to anything. I will just say that in the past, um purchasing or selling cars, when we've sold used cars,
Mhm,
buyers have
mhm.
been like, "Can you just leave that blank?" And I'm like, Okay, but, like, not up to me. Whatever number you put there, that's for you,
No,
between you, your maker, and the DMV, which is honestly more powerful than your maker sometimes."
day to day, one could argue it's. I imagine just like anything, there are always some people who look for the loophole, and there are always some people who will exploit it. Some will consider exploiting it. By and large, I think this is going to be helpful for folks getting into an EV. Honestly, lease returns are going to be great options for a lot of folks. Like you said, it's not going to be every model, but
Mhm.
my Tesla here is what I could trade it in for. Obviously, that's not the private party value, but better or worse, it's probably going to be right around this $25,000 mark if I went and sold it myself, which is quite a depreciation for me. But the second owner is of huge benefit, and I have made the argument for a couple years that EVs are the best used cars you can buy for any number of reasons.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's tons of caveats, right? But if you're looking for a bang for the buck, that Volvo we have is about 400 horsepower, all-wheel drive. A lot of fun to drive, and while there are some
Yep.
limitations, like a longer road trip, yeah, it's hard to beat that for under $30,000, especially if you're shopping new, because you're just not going to do it, not even
Yeah, it's
close.
pretty decent deal. I
Yep.
will say for the resale value crowd, this is the tax credits around EVs are logically a huge contributor to the resale value
Yep.
concerns people have about EVs. And people tend to think about this, I think, the wrong way. So if you buy a new EV and you paid $47,000 for it, well, paid, quote
Hmm.
unquote, but you
Yeah.
got a $7,500 credit on it, then you really only paid $40,000. So the
Right.
reason your EV depreciates like a rock that first year is that you get normal depreciation. And then you also factor in the fact that it cost you $7,500 less. And that is
Yeah.
baked into that used car price because everybody
It's the
knows you
effective
got it.
cost.
Yeah.
and
Everybody
and
knows
people
you
are
got
looking at it, and it's a great headline, right? So my Tesla, I bought my Model 3 shortly before, not right before, thank goodness, I had a couple months to enjoy it, but shortly before Tesla lowered the price on the product.
it.
And what ended up happening is that they took about the full federal tax credit price off of the retail price. meaning that my 45 and change vehicle was now brand new, going to cost under $40,000.
Yep.
That means that my value drops the exact same amount. If I take
Exactly.
that aside, I didn't pay 45.5, not effectively when you factor in the tax credit like I did when making the purchase, which was part of that decision making process. I paid about 38.5, somewhere in there. So the fact now that my car is at, I think the last I looked, it was like 21,000 if I was going to go trade it in. That looks like it's less than 50% of the remaining value. But that's if I look at the MSRP, and that's not what
Mhm.
I consider that I
Exactly.
paid.
And it's entirely logical because if
Yep.
I were looking at a Model 3, why would I pay, you know, $7,000 less than MSRP for
Mhm.
that used Model 3 when I could go buy a new Model 3 with a $7,500 credit for the same price? That's how people
Yep.
have to think of this. And
Yep.
I think that this EV tax credit may have rolling knock-on benefits in this way because
Mhm.
if your used car then gets $4,000 off, there is some adjustment on the market for that effective
Yep.
value. We don't know how many cars actually and how many cars and car buyers, et cetera, actually are getting this credit. There's not a lot of good reporting around this. So I think
Yeah.
it's gonna have much less of an impact than obviously the new EV tax credit,
Right.
but it's probably not gonna be 0.
I'll tell you what, for folks who are considering EVs and you have a multifamily household, I'm just going to throw this out there. The Nissan Leaf makes a heck of a commuter car.
Hmm. Yeah. Leaf's batteries, though. Ooh, I don't know if I'd
I
wanna do
know.
that.
I'm not talking about the first
Yeah,
years, and the first years wouldn't qualify
that's true.
because they're going to probably have been on their second, third, fourth owner at this point, somewhere in there, second or third. But if you're looking at a lease return, and yes, they are not going to be they're not the best cooled, they're not the best managed, so it's not going to have the longest life. But your commuter car is just to and from the office, and so you should be pretty okay for saving a couple bucks.
I just can't leave. Just can't do it. Can't leave.
I could.
I
I
that
could.
hard
I
no.
admit I would not be over the moon about it, but I love my old Saturn commuter car, and the Leaf would be better than that in most regards.
I have to at the time, I was definitely solidly on board with the Leaf, but as time has moved on, I think that there are just better used EVs out there that are not really gonna cost you that much more than the Leaf. I would Bolt every day over the
Mm,
Leaf. Bolt, I
that's
think,
fair.
has proved better longevity, especially the refreshed Bolt. The software, GM's touchscreen was just so much better than Nissan's.
The Leaf is cushier though. It's more comfortable.
Tiny bit, tiny bit. You could EUV and you could have a chance at Super Cruise.
You could.
I would just go. There better things out there. There are other leaves on the tree.
Yeah. Now,
Try a branch instead.
one small piece here that I thought was an interesting ad, and you pointed this one out. It says used cars must be plug-in electric or fuel cell with at least 7 kilowatt hours of battery capacity.
Hmm. You could do a
7
plug-in
kilowatt
hybrid, which is
hours
nice.
is very, very small. So yes, does this include those plug-in hybrids?
Yeah, yeah. So unless you're looking at some of the very early, very, very small plug-in hybrids,
Yep.
this you could get the used EV credit on a Sportage plug-in hybrid or a RAV4 plug-in hybrid might be tricky to get price-wise in there.
Yeah.
But there's certainly going to be some Ford Energy products, et cetera, that you could
Yep.
maybe find out there in this price
Yep.
range.
Had one myself. Yep.
Hmm.
I'm thinking something like oh, let's see. You could do Nero. You could maybe
Yep.
find something like a Honda Clarity, Chevy Volt, perhaps. You'd have to find a newer one and make sure it's that first owner. But there could be some options out there.
I have to admit, I loved the Clarity. I think that was a big loss for Honda to ditch it in the way that they did. I think they
Mhm.
should have just given us a plug-in hybrid Accord. They should still give us a plug-in hybrid Accord, obviously. But
Honda, if you're listening,
I liked that the fact that the Clarity was basically the bigger, cushier sedan Bolt that actually
hmm
was usable because
hmm
it gave better fuel economy than a Chevy Bolt, very similar electric
Volt
range.
with a V.
Sorry,
Yep.
Volt, yes, V.
Yep.
My bad. But very similar electric range, significantly better fuel economy, better performance actually as well,
hmm
smoother, more comfortable, quieter.
More space.
I think it looked a tiny bit better, not a lot better, just
Very different looks.
a smidge.
Had that little wheel cover
The
situation.
wheel
Love that.
skirts, yeah. Ooh, not a wheel skirt fan. No, it gives me Buick Roadmaster vibes.
And then we went from Clarity. Clarity's on its way out to Insight is back, and another short-lived return. So
Yeah, but we're getting Prelude now, so
we are getting Prelude, and I will admit, full disclosure, I'm excited. I have always loved the Prelude.
is
I'm
this a
hoping,
prelude to Honda's next wave of electrification?
or
Or is it more of a prologue?
It's a prelude from the prologue to the Zero series. Obviously, these naming conventions are very understandable and easy to track. I'm hoping that Prelude is able to distinguish itself from the Civic Hybrid.
I'm going to go with
Aesthetically,
no.
it will. My question is, what else do they do? And Honda has not been afraid previously to try something a little bit different. I'm hoping they do something a little bit different here on the Prelude, not just copy paste. We like the Civic Hybrid here. We've talked about it. We enjoy it. So there's nothing wrong with it. But give me some wider tires. Give me a different suspension feel. Maybe a slightly different interior. I would love to see it. But fingers crossed.
I am going to guess, no basis for this, going to guess it's basically going to be a two-door Civic Hybrid.
There are worse situations. I'm hoping it's a little bit farther from it.
I mean, I don't think that's a bad idea because Civic Coupe used to sell relatively well. Then they killed the Coupe. Maybe this is just the way of bringing the Civic Coupe back and giving it some nostalgic vibes and allowing it to be just a little bit more different.
The Prelude was, originally very similar to the Accord, and it was the Accord Coupe of sorts. So if we can do that, but distinguish itself more than exterior, which, by the way, I will take. I think it looks a lot better than the Civic Coupe does. It's going to be, I think, a little less practical in space, which again is good. That's part of what leads to the aesthetic, because it can be sportier. You're less worried about your backseat occupants, that sort of thing. But give me a different interior. Give me something to zhuzh it up. Tempt me, Honda, please.
And that brings us along to our last thought, which is, what is it on new cars this week that has you riled up that should just never exist on another car?
Oh, gosh. New cars this week. Because it turns out every week there's something a little bit new, right?
Yeah, every week there's something out there that you just go like, I don't know.
Why is that there?
Yeah. Why is that? For me, I have to say this is inspired by Kia K4. It is overtly sporty tuning and trims and styling without any actual sport there. I am offended by this. Like, if you're going to do the look, give me some go, or go in a different styling direction. Go in a more luxurious, more opulent styling direction. Or at least ditch the Squircle. I mean, the square steering wheel.
Squircle.
But the square sporty steering wheel with the grips everywhere and the paddles on the back. I mean, it's there.
PlayStation controller, yeah.
It's there in your hands the entire time that you are wanting the car to go faster. And so you're left there going, foot on the floor, grabbing the Squircle, going, why won't you effing go? And you know what? I noticed that if you grab the steering wheel and you do this sort of pumping motion like that, like make it go fast, it doesn't actually help.
That is a darn shame, because you're putting in the effort. So where's the result?
Right. It's not like one of those childhood toys where you can make it scoot faster. No.
Right. All right. So mine is actually going to go the opposite direction, because I mentioned earlier, and this is based on a trip we took this week, looking at other models, and it's the more interesting trims, right? So you get the Civic has the SI, right? And it's still based on the Civic, but it's a sportier version. I love that we're seeing a little bit more of this. We don't have a K4 GT, but we have a GT line. Without spoiling anything, I am not so sure about making everything more interesting, or if it works. And there's a huge trend right now towards off-road trims, more adventure-capable vehicles. And
so you want less adventure?
No, I'm just not sure it's the same copy paste formula with every single model. Putting all-terrain tires on it obviously is going to add capability, but when it comes to the aesthetic, it's the copy paste is more cladding, a splashy accent color, and usually a different grille, bigger, wider, more open, throw in some fog lights, that sort of thing. But this week I discovered that it really just doesn't work for every trim, and even though capability might be there, the aesthetic does not always match. So I would like to
If
see
I'm looking
some of
around
those
my
trims.
camera here, I see that someone is wearing a puffy Patagonia. Uh,
Who's
did
that?
you did you rock climb here?
This. I live in this, and I'm from the Northwest, so I'm entitled to it. Thank
Ah,
you.
okay. I mean, it
Yeah.
seems rugged, outdoorsy cladding.
hmm
Are
hmm
you feeling rugged and outdoorsy?
Did I drive my Tesla to Starbucks this morning? Maybe, perhaps.
What did you order at Starbucks? That tells us everything we need to know.
That's not important.
It totally is important. We must
It
know.
had no whipped cream, so leave your judgment to the side. My
I
whole
will I'll
point
tell
here.
you what I got. I tell you what I got. I went to the Summit Market, which is my
Mhm.
favorite local grocery store because there's nothing hippy dippy or Santa Cruz County than going
No,
to the
there's not.
local
I've been there.
place, going to
Mhm.
the local place for your coffee. And
Yep.
Claudia, who is lovely,
Mhm.
Claudia made me a non-fat latte that I put one Splenda in because gotta worry about the
Correct.
cholesterol.
Okay, so I have to go to the next town over because I do not have one here where I live, and I got my sweetened black tea lemonade,
Oh, a sweetened black that wow.
which is what I tend to live off of. Is
Can my
iced tea
toxic
lemonade.
masculinity take your masculine card away, your boy card away? What do we call that? I
Come
don't
and
know.
get it. Let's and it. We had a long day yesterday. I may have also got a warm chocolate chip cookie, and you
Black
can
tea
leave
should
your
have milk
judgment
in
to
it.
the side.
Should have black tea with milk in it. That's what a real man drinks.
And
Also,
here I am
also
chugging on
Splenda.
my liquid death.
Oh, a liquid. There we go. You redeemed yourself with the manly liquid death. There we go.
Absolutely.
And with that version of toxic masculinity covered now, we will see everybody next week. And
Thank you
I
for
don't know if
joining us.
I don't know if we can promise to never do this again, but you
But
can
that's why you're
tell us
here.
you can tell us in the comment section, and we forgot to read comments. Oh well, next time.
We'll get to it. Leave them. We do read them. And what's your Starbucks order?
Yes, let us know. And
Yeah.
is it appropriately butch? You can also leave us voicemails 669-842-1947. You can voice memo us to hey@autobuyersguide.com. And if you love us, and I'm sure some of you do, maybe somewhere, it's probably my mom listening. You can leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform and actually type one out because those are apparently very helpful. I gave myself a 5-star review. If you want to see my own 5-star review, you can read the review section. Did you
Last time
5-star review us yet, Travis?
I haven't, but last time I checked on Spotify, we still had 5 stars. So
Wow, we're at 4.8 on Apple Podcasts, which is pretty good.
yeah,
But
not
I
bad.
am offended that you did not give ourselves. You didn't give yourself a 5-star. It should be positive reinforcement.
You got to work for it, and life is about constant improvement.
Anyway, see everybody later.
Bye.
If you're looking for a new or used car to buy, maybe a truck or SUV or all-electric ride, we're the guys to help you decide. Here on the Auto Buyer's Guide. If discussions about donuts in the parking lot is what you came here looking for, well then my friend you're lost. Because our very human host Alex, we swear he's not a boss. Does he respect the cars a lot? He does, perhaps too much, yes probably. But he'll help you find your ride here on the Auto Buyer's Guide.